Okay. Hey guys, it's me, Won Tawnn. I am here. Hello, Won fam. Hello, Won fam. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Hello. Y'all, we are going to be getting into some things. Oh. Okay. Okay. So, I will say, guys, we are going to get into some heavy stuff. Shocker. We are going to get into some heavy stuff. And we're going to do that with a microphone. Hold on. Fabulous. Mirror ready. Makeup. Wonderful. Just 1 second. Let's do this. Oh wait, I wonder if it'll be good with the Bluetooth situation without us having to. Where are the directions? I don't know. Okay, plug it in here. Hello? Does it work? I'm assuming it's working because it's green. Okay, microphone on. What is up, chat? What is up? We are mic'd up, as they say in the show business, eh? Hold on. Get in there. Okay. Get y'all nestled in. Make sure we're set up. Oh. Ah. Okay. We need to, I'm gonna move those little people, right? So that they can be more with us. Attention to detail. Okay. Now, perfect. That's what we want to do. Oh, love that. Cool. Cool. Where should we put the mic? Is this good? Are we good? I love it. The next thing. Holy shit! I got pricked. Motherfucker. Okay. Wait, how? This isn't. How do you get it in there? Oh, okay, okay. Okay. Wait, you know what? We're gonna add these with accessories at the end. Thank you. And we're gonna close that up. Actually, see, but I need that to balance the crimper. Look. Okay. Let's get into it. Let's get into it. This is what I have to say. Okay. Okay. So this is the deal. First, I want to start off by saying, okay. Now we're doing the heavy stuff first, chat. So look. Hey, thanks for the follows. Thanks for the follows, y'all. Hey, we met our goal. We met our goal. W's in the chat. W. That's awesome. Okay. Okay. But this is how we're starting off. This is how we're coming today. Okay. There's a difference in knowing and understanding who your kids are. And when I say kids, I mean like teenagers, young adults, um, just human beings in general, but I just put kids, okay? So there's a difference in knowing and understanding who your kids are, how they feel, what they want, need, and long for, and having control over them and placing your burdens and projections on them and expecting them to meet your standards and expectations or make you feel better, okay? Or make you feel more at ease and proud of yourself for who you are so that you can have peace and some sense of relief, okay? With that being said, so last night we went down the rabbit hole, right? We went down the rabbit hole. And mind you, that I swear everything has been happening very, just when you become aligned with, you know, following, making your own choices and following in faith, even when it's hard, just signs begin to hit you. Signs begin to hit you, and you have a choice whether to take them as signs or not. That's free will. But, some things are just spooky. So I told y'all whatever. So I went into the Spirit Halloween store, right? Got some good scares, some good laughs, some good ideas. And I had saw this cute little one of the costumes. I saw a lot of different makeup ideas and face ideas. It was awesome. It was great inspiration. Okay. Halloween is awesome. W's. Um, but I had gotten the inspiration to do the little down the rabbit hole. And then at the time, I wasn't really thinking of the Matrix, but I saw Harley Quinn's makeup and then I saw the down the rabbit hole at Alice in Wonderland. I liked that idea. And then I had the bunny ears and it just came into the Matrix, which is one of the last albums. Y'all, I stay talking about music. Okay. Um, One of the last movies I watched last year going into this new year. Um, so I did that, and then come to find out when we were watching our YouTube videos, I watched Holly Madison on Keke Palmer on the Baby This Is Keke Palmer show. Okay. I love it. I can't do it as good as she does. Okay, I don't need to. She's Keke Palmer. Thank you. But anyways, staying on topic as best we can. Um, so Holly Madison on Baby This Is Keke Palmer. I hadn't wanted to really go down that alley because it had been such a big part of my life and I just had tuned it out. Um, and but I'm really glad that I watched it. And it was 4 months. It was 4 months old actually, but I wanted to watch it. And so we did. And she had ended up, Holly had written a book called Down the Rabbit Hole. And so how ironic was that the stream we had titled was Down the Rabbit Hole. Okay. And then I end up watching this episode and find out, she had written a book, Down the Rabbit Hole. And she was discussing with Keke, and this whole year I've been on my own exploration of self-journey, self-love, self-discovery, and finding my own voice and empowerment, all those things. Learning to be my authentic self, which is all feelings and emotions honored. And, not having to hide who you are because you're sensitive or soft or, all the things. Like you feel your feelings, you have empathy. Okay? So, so get stuck on that. Um, so basically, the episode really goes into the interview episode. It really goes into not only Holly's life, from her perspective now, at the Playboy Mansion as a girlfriend and all that, and but things that she's learned, lessons, I don't lessons, but like truths, her truths that she's learned, and how she liberated herself. People don't give that enough of a look or credit or whatever you want to say. Like the amount of freedom and power and strong mind that takes to remove yourself from that situation and to continue moving forward and believing in yourself and not letting that be the last stop or the end, like that wasn't the end of her story. She's had so much since then. And it's not only the fact that I hate having to say his name, Hugh Hefner, because I understand, I love that I saw some of the people now don't know her for that. They know her for her podcasts and true crime and stuff. And so I want to honor that. But this is important because with everything I've been learning this year and how my view of the world's been growing and changing and adapting to reality. Um, I've talked about how I've learned and really seen the control and sexualization and um, just belittlement of women and the lack of respect and care. Um, just, being seen as an object or a thing, a source of unconditional love for others, or, and it's just been, it's been really heartbreaking, of course, to see, that because, we watch these movies and believe everybody's like, I believed that people are all the good guys and, everybody has honor out there and really sees people for who they are but not everybody's like that. Some people do have a different agenda and a different mindset and don't want to they don't see other people for their worth on the inside. They see everybody as just the cast, literally the cast, mask, all the whatever you want to call it on the outside. Um, and then that's like solidified with a purpose because so you have this man, old ass, nasty ass, pervert, pedophile man, Hugh Hefner, but he made a lot of money and he made a lot of money off making women a fantasy. And so when they're a fantasy, their feelings don't matter. Their insides don't matter unless you want to dress it up to make it a role play thing. And so it comes back to everything being sexualized. And he had these young women who had nowhere to go, who were looking for, a life, fun, friends, love, to be understood, belonging, and he gave them this whole fantasy and charmed them and acted like shit was sweet. And really, it was all, all a just power play and a facade of just insecurity of his own and just harm to other people. But everybody glorified it because they were like, oh, this is the man, bro. This is fucking sick. He like, he's got money, he's got bitches, he's got this, that, and the other. Like, and look at what that did. Look at how that set up our society, though. Like, because they all glorify that. Like, why would you glorify a nasty old man that just sexualizes young women and controls them and manipulates them? Why is that glorified? Why was that made into a mass commercialization in this country? And then those same people want to judge people and gatekeep. I just, and it, and it just really is sad because we are human beings. We are human beings with spirits, with feelings, with souls. We're all children of God. And so why should, you know, why is that okay? Like he had them in his home. He forced them to be on this reality show. Thankfully, it ended up being something positive for them because it turned, from what I gathered, they were able to create and at least do fun things and get more freedom and free will, like for what it was. I just look, but he forced them to be on the show, or they would be homeless. Okay. Um, and then they used the show to make them play these roles, okay, where you have the youngest one who's still in her teens, mind you, and she's the sporty, hot, young, framed to be gold digger one, okay? And then you have the other one, Holly, who's like prim, proper, OCD, and she's the caretaker and the main girlfriend. So, okay, the wife in the one night. And then you have the one in the middle, Bridget, who she was she was studying her to get her degree. She liked to dress up in different ways and be spooky and scary and have hobbies and stuff. And she was made and ate like normal food or whatever. And they fat shamed her on national television and they made her like the odd one out. So think about that in terms of, what does that do to a whole generation of young women that grew up on this? And mind you, in my own personal life, I had, like growing up as a child, this is what I watched, you know? Um, my older sister, she was obsessed with Playboy, and that was put into that was put into my life to watch, like as a 8-year-old. Okay. And my mom would take me to Best Buy and buy the seasons on DVD. Okay. So that I would go to my room just like binge because, I had an emotionally immature and unstable parent who used alcohol to cover up her own pain. And she couldn't be there with a bunch of other things going on, but she couldn't be there for me as I needed her as a child. And so she would put, here's your TV shows, go to your room and be quiet, then go to school and repeat, repeat. So the only source of it was really interesting growing up because I had my aunt who passed away. She helped raise me, and she was the only person who gave me unconditional nurturing. I want to say nurturing love, but unconditional to the best of her knowledge, to the best of any of our knowledge and abilities. Um, you know, she raised me in the church so that I wouldn't end up, there's a lot of blaming going on. She raised me in the church and always, I was the good child. I wasn't going to end up like my brother and sister or my cousins, or, that was always what was like. I was the prayer. I was I I was special. I was going to save. I was the family and save my mom and be a gift from God. And so, and my aunt, she was a martyr in the truest sense of the word. And I know that has a negative connotation, but this is what she gave all of her soul and all of her life into the church, her job, her friends, helping others. So that was the stable figure I had, a constant giver and martyr. That, and then emotionally unstable, checked out, or hysterical parent back at home who shoved me in front of the TV and or couldn't be bothered to get up, so I would have to crawl around for snacks. And then when I gained weight inevitably as getting older, because I wasn't being taken anywhere to do anything, and I was, eating what I was able to grab, except for when I would sneak out on my bike. Um, it's just, and then yeah, and then a lot of other things with my family there to unpack that, but it goes to the point that I had these very extreme representations and caretakers in my life. If you want to call it a caretaker, I was actually, from being the giving martyr, martyr church girl that was trying to, because, as a child, like you're being told if you're good enough, like, that's how it's perceived. Like, if you are good enough, then you'll have peace. If you're good enough, then you'll have love. If you pray enough, you won't be afraid. And so for a child that's in an unstable environment and is constantly, like that's why religion can be such an intense thing. So basically I was told, you know, I was taught that, and I did end up growing my own relationship with Christ multiple times in my life, and that's what has led me to this point. But, like, there's this intense Christianity going on. And then you never feel like enough there because everybody, you know, at the church there, they all got their moms and dads and nice homes, and, I'm sure everybody has their problems, but compare that with people that come from an unstable environment and you're put into these situations and just supposed to interact and, like, you know, um, but yeah, just these extreme models of what it is to be a human being, right? And all this goes to say, so then I've talked a lot about the things I've learned and my journey and unpacking all that and the things I've been healing from, because from all that, then came the dating narcissists myself and toxic friendship situations, because if I wasn't constantly giving to other people, I was taking on other people's burdens, because that's what I had learned to do at home, either go be quiet or be loving and caring and help and do everything I can to make things right. And that wasn't, it wasn't just like that for my single mother. It was like that for my cousin, my sister, like, you know, different relatives. You become the caretaker and the peacemaker, because that's the, they think, because I don't know what they think, but y'all get what I'm saying. That's the role you're given. Everybody, somebody in that family is given that role, in each family. Um, but I just always had these intense feelings, right? So yeah, but like I had said, I grew up watching The Girls Next Door, and I enjoyed the show because it had like holidays, it had festivities, it had cute outfits, it had girl friendships. Like, they had a belonging. They did different things. It really was, like a fun show. And I remember too, there were only my aunt, there were only 3 times she ever really got mad at me. And one of them was about not making eye contact and shaking hands with other people, which is funny because, well, I'm going to get to back on Holly. But it was for watching, which she always sat me, if we weren't doing church stuff, I was always sat in front of a TV over there. Um, and so I was watching The Girls Next Door on E, because that's what I watch at home. And she got mad at me. She was like, "Do you know what you're watching? Do you understand?" Like, as a child. No, I don't know. Like, I'm watching, pretty fun people have a good time, and I watch it at home all the time. What do you mean? But that blame was placed on me. And so all this being said, I grew up as a young person with, I giving a lot to others, and because, you're also told, like, and this is nothing, it's not their fault, but watching shows like that in your, formative years, like, that's when I started thinking also that, from the freaking Women's World magazines that my mom would read, that would tell people, this is what you need to do to diet, this is what you need to do to lose weight, and then all the culture that was going on, and then watching those shows and being told by my older siblings and cousins, like, this is what's hot, this is what you need to earn love and get love, and this is how, people, you're wanted. This is how you're wanted. This is how you're adored. This is how you know. So again, grew up a lonely, um, just with all these extremes and wanting to do right by God and love others well and be a good friend and a good girlfriend and a good daughter and a good sister and a good cousin and a good this and a good that and a good student, and I want to make something of myself, and I had all these extreme feelings and all these crappy people, and no competent adults to talk with me about my emotions. Um, so all these self-destructive tendencies came up, and going back into toxic situations, and that has lasted, like I said, until now. I mean, it's still, so this is what I've been learning and healing and recovering from and empowering myself from. empowering myself to rise from, so that I can be who I am meant to be, who I want to be, who God made me to be. And someone that, has self-love and self-respect and self-worth. Because those things aren't modeled in society and clapped for, like everything else we discussed. Control, wealth, looks, materialistic things. Those are what is glorified and clapped for and modeled in the society, so that, old men feel hot and young women sleep with them, but it's okay because it's cool, like the Playboy Mansion. Okay. And all the rich people, dudes, all the rich old men, like that too, so that they can have some sort of sense of ego and control. And that's what's going on in our society. Okay? But that isn't addressed. But calling young women names and making fun of them and ganging up on them and allowing it from the time they're young boys, just run amok and treat people like dirt. No acknowledgement for the spirit that's inside. And this comes back to say, so that I found out watching the podcast, and I went back and watched some older interviews, not really older, but like within the last 2 years, we watched multiple of the videos because I really wanted to hear what she had to say, because I wanted it, it pieces together something in my mind and heals a part of my past as well. And it helps me, so it helps me from then, and it helps me now, seeing, how she got out of that and grew from that. Because she found out that Holly found out that she has autism. And that really stood out to me, because that's why I went through and, kind of spoke on my background and upbringing, because with everything going on, like obviously I'm neurodivergent. I don't like labels, because that was what I chased in college to explain everything before, rather than everything we just discussed. Taking on all that blaming yourself. You see, and people do that. They think when in situations like that, and there's a lot of people with a lot of situations, as we see and learn, when people continue to have these situations, they feel like, there's something wrong with them. And you even see it in the Harry Potter movies too. When Harry's like, what, like, is there something wrong with me? Like, maybe I am the bad guy. Like, maybe I am evil. So that's, you know, and then, you realize, no, this world is a scary place. And people are not all good. And things are a lot more difficult than you thought. Um, so her autism diagnosis, what stuck out to me was she was discussing how being in bikini competitions and the sun, like, working at Hooters, how doing those things and those jobs, like, it helped her, and even cheerleading too, like, but really talking about Hooters more, but still those things kind of go into it. It's just that doing those things helped her with, like she didn't know she had autism, so she liked those things because they gave her a specific role to play. Like at Hooters, literally like a script kind of deal. But, you know, it speaks to the fact of what we've been learning too. And she said I wasn't being my authentic self. Even later on, when she did, she got the courage to leave Hef and the Playboy Mansion and she went on to do her own show. The people that forced them on the girls next door, this evil executive producer of the show who controls everything and set up those characters for them on the show and the dynamics that we talked about, he's the one who was the executive producer on her next show. So even her getting away, she was still entrapped in that circle. That's what I'm talking about when I say she still had the courage and the bravery. Like, how do you not, lose hope and give up in that? They could have done, who knows what they were angry about or plotting against her. Like, you know? And so, and mind you, if you look into autism, like, that's what I had to. So we've been talking about that though, right? The roles. And we've been talking about that with the Life of the Showgirl album and with me learning about being my authentic self, becoming my authentic self. And so I just thought that really stuck out to me when she said that. And, I ended up having a conversation with the AI and it was answering back to me and you just all these things kind of rung true. Um, so whether I'm on the spectrum or not, like whatever the case is there, I just think it's really eye-opening because it did say like, women often go undiagnosed and it becomes masked as striving for perfection and people pleasing and all these attempts to fit in and survive. Because from her description too, it sounded like, her parents, like, and this doesn't mean all people are bad people. Some people just don't ever, you know, but it sounds like they were emotionally checked out as well, and they weren't there for her in the way that she needed. And so how true is that for so many people in this world? And so imagine the amount of people who go undiagnosed, whether it be autism or, that's why it's just so crazy. People should be kind to each other anyways. But when you really get into all these things, it really shows you how much this world makes everything like glorified on the outside and everything is about a profit. Clothes, food, money, and then you die. A lot of people don't ever want to be, they don't even want to be seen for who they really are or other people to know them for who they really are. Like everything, everybody wants to be apathetic. Everybody wants to be cool or, not that deep or that's so sensitive. And then that's taught too. That's taught too. So everybody's just afraid and going along with whatever, like think about that too. Yesterday when we were doing the red pill, blue pill matrix thing, it was a good amount of people who said the blue pill, I just want to go back to sleep. Like it's so sad. And you know, that shows like why there's so much hurt and anger and lack of care and consideration. Like you get one life and everything is made to be about the outside, not even the inside. Like we're all gonna get old, your body's gonna waste away, and you never know when you have. And a lot of it is distraction too, because you know, it just gets easy. But I like that, you know, she said that doing the Hooters, like it made her feel like she was good at being social because she was succeeding in the role. And I think that's another thing too, is people get comfortable in these roles and they don't know any other way to be. Like that's what makes them feel, their body feel rested or okay, or you know, or they just don't have any other way to be. But I think it all made a lot of sense hearing that. And it brought, yeah, like brought a lot of healing and realization. Um, I just can't believe that people were okay with this, you know? And that's the other thing too that makes me mad is they blamed these young women, these three young women. They blamed them and were like, oh, like they're the problem. They're the hoes, the bimbos. They're dumb. They're gold diggers. They weren't they weren't even understanding the fact that this old ass man who made a empire off of pictures of naked women had these young women under his control and was throwing these parties where God knows what went on. He had his doctors going to pick out the women. And y'all want to talk about drugging people and stuff? Like, and it was set up, they were set up right by the college there. Just sick. And I just think it speaks, you know, it speaks to a lot of what's going on in our world. Who's hanging out at those parties? I don't know. And that goes back to the extremes too, because that gets twisted. You know evil from not, though. You know evil from not. You know people who I don't even want to get into it, but you know people who sexualize and objectify women, and y'all put those people in positions of power and give them wealth and good name and think about that. Y'all do all that and place all of the blame on the women. Like that's sad. And that's why there's so much emotional abuse and toxicity going on in this world instead of equal, mindful, balanced love. That was a lot to unpack there, but horrifying. It's horrifying. That's what it is. It just shows the deep lack of respect for human beings, for women, for mothers, for one another, for yourselves, because that constant glorification of pleasure and fantasy and quick fixes and fast lifestyle, like instead of, being gentle and soft and pure and having empathy, really understanding and knowing yourself and your purpose, it just gets clouded with all of this toxicness and noise and sickness. But the bright side to come out of all that was truly that they made it out of that situation, that they continued going and and Holly's a mother. She's, been married. She has children. She's written books. She has podcasts. People keep going. They don't give up. They don't just let those things define them. They respect and love themselves enough. They have faith. And really, yeah, you can just read between the lines in the different interviews, like people, that have discernment and understanding. Like literally the fact that the doctor was going and picking out young girls to go to parties. That they were taking buses from the college campus. And it just makes me mad too, because there's all these same types of people that, like, old men that set up this sexualization and objectifying and sickness. They're the same ones that make all these rules and control and tell everybody what to do and have a holier than thou approach. And this world is like, yes, that is what's right. Do you not realize how, like, when you pass whatever higher power you believe in, you have to answer that, like, you can't go back and change it. You have to go answer those things. You have to, when you get those last look of your life, the flash, I believe in a place for the eternal soul. And there's a difference between, oh, I'm a sinner, Papa knows me, and then someone who, again, true evil, lives their life like harming others, or is out for, destruction, power, and wealth. Like, that's not to say, don't work hard and get your money. That's You know the difference. What did Nikki say? They know the difference. Mm, 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 mm. I'm not gonna lie, I thought you was in a movie for a sec. Why does it look like a movie? I'm dead. That was a lot too. I said we were going to be getting into it and unpacking a lot, and that we did. I feel like there's even more to, to unpack there, but it goes back. Like I said, I told y'all about my own kind of life, and like I've talked about the fact that I was I was bullied and in person and online, like so I had all that stuff going on at home and within myself, and then that stuff was going on. And mind you, the bullying came from people. Well, I like they were kids, but I've already forgiven and been working through this, but like it came from people that I loved and had given parts of myself to, parts of my life. I had invited them into my life. Like, I'd prayed over them, grew up with them, gave everything that I had. Um, so I just feel like all these things are really important because, with the generation now that's growing up with parents that expect all this fulfillment from their children and constantly from the minute they're born they're placed in front of screens, and some of them they're neglected emotionally, physically. um, it's so important to have all this information and understanding to help our world, to help these kids. People want to talk about, oh, things are getting crazier, they're hurting themselves more, kids are wild, like they blame the children and not the parents. And I'm not saying blame, let me not say blame. I'm saying, with all this unawareness and like we talk the things we talk about daily, you know, the things that I talk with y'all about daily over here. All these things do fit together. But that's how we protect them, is by stop glorifying and protecting old ways of the past, like, your parents and grandparents' ways. Break the cycle. Choose to love yourself. Choose healing. Choose to forgive. Choose to have faith. Choose to move forward. Choose to create. Do I always say choose to love yourself? Because yes. Be gentler with yourself and with others. Maybe understand yourself more or understand others more, like everybody just wants to give up and go lay down, go to sleep, go watch a show, that all these things numb out our true spirits and who we are. So it's choosing to turn off the phone and the electronics and go outside. Choosing to find things to make you happy, or choosing to, write gratitude lists, or find ways that are healthy for you to release and cope, rather than just going for the easy, like, old ways, whatever that means for each person. Learning, learning about, you know, self-respect, respect for others, respect for yourself. Because if all these old men respected themselves, they wouldn't be going around trying to control and find and prey on young women. Okay? They would want nice, equal, balanced, healthy love and relationships. If people found fulfillment in themselves, or, whatever their gifts are, they wouldn't be so concerned about, spending all their money on new handbags and shoes and being disgusted by the bums and the poor. Like, well, it's not my fault they got that way. Like, all of these things, you know what I'm saying? These are all examples, but it's just like all of these things go together because it's all of either the inner twistedness of the mind, or, the way, like, the ways people just cope with that twistedness and forget about humanity and care and love. Because often twisted ass people are glorified, whether, they're magazine empires, or they're principals, or teachers, or priests, or even fathers, like, or mothers. People need to stop acting like it's, it's literally just like nobody ever believes young people. They always say that they're dramatic and, that they don't know. And so it's like these things just continue on, and then, they stop believing in themselves and they give up just like their parents did. And everybody just tries to find quick fixes after that. Like, it's like, no, we have a living, fighting, breathing spirit in us. And we're allowed to be soft. We're allowed to be sensitive. We're allowed to care about other humans. We're allowed to want better for others in this world. And we're allowed to have space and boundaries. Like, these things shouldn't be either or. Basic human rights. Thank you. I think a good example too of like speaking of, and this is why I appreciate art too, because people really can channel these feelings into creative things. So movies, TV shows, music, okay? They inspire and they help people process. But I was going to say a really good example is literally the Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events. In those books, I stayed reading those when I stayed reading those at the Barnes and Nobles under the little tree in there. Um, my aunt would take me in there while she would help others with their recovery meetings. Um, and I would read the Lemony Snickets or the American Girl books. But that show was really good. The more recent adaptation that they did with Neil Patrick Harris. hmm It really shows. I think that really shows. It shows the connivingness and the wickedness and the neglect um, of adults and their duplicity. The way that they can lie and connive and harm children and threaten them and coerce them. And he tried to marry the young girl too in the movie and the show, and the books. Mind you, it was for the money, but again, it's like, that it says enough right there. So I just think that I pray for this world. And I have hope because I have faith in God. And I appreciate all of this taking us down the rabbit hole. Okay. Thank y'all for the follows, by the way. Thank you. We really hit our goal. We really hit our goal. We went over it too. We went over it too. There's a lot to unpack. Okay. But yeah. Am I going to unpack more about the autism? Probably not. Probably not, to be honest. But she did say it made more sense to her when once she understood that. And I feel like, again, the labels just really don't matter. It was like when I went to college and did these tests and stuff, and they said, oh, you have depression, anxiety that's stemmed from PTSD from your family. Even though I told her the whole situation in my life, but she just blamed my family. It's like there was a lot more going on there than that. But we'll throw that aside. Um, it's like, what did that really matter though? Because if you read the Bible or whatever your faith may be, like, human beings all have the capability of being depressed or anxious. Okay. And that was another thing too that Holly said was that before, before she had found out about autism and gotten out of the situation, all that, that at the mansion she was like, well, I don't know why I'm having these breakdowns and I'm upset because it was when he was trying to force her to, or when, you know, well, everything that was going on, and then it was like, okay, you're gonna do the show. And then she was like having a breakdown, and they were like, oh, you can't go see anyone because then they'll tell you to leave and know about what's going on here. So, um, here, see this therapist of mine that worked for the company. And then they put her on antidepressants. And that just kind of reminds me to my own story of after everything I've described that went on, went on in my life. I go to college, I'm on my own. I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I sad? Why am I not? I joined a freaking cult. It was a Christian sorority. I've talked about it before. I'm not going to keep talking about it, but that's why it took me, that there's a whole lot to unpack there too. But anyways, I was trying to fit in with these nice small town girls that grew up, with Christian or super religious families, which is all this religion instances I've had in my life. Freaking Texas, bro. Hey, America, I don't know. But I couldn't understand, like, I had all this sadness of all these things that have happened, all the way, and all these inner feelings that have carried with me throughout my life. And then I was like, well, why aren't I fitting in with these people? Like, why don't they, like, what's wrong with me? And then they would use like, oh, like we had these multiple meetings a week and you had to be part of the Bible study and you had to do obviously a like help some type of community service, and then you had to go to these 6 a.m. meetings. Um, and then so then it was like, oh, you fail, and then you had to wear a certain pin, and you had to explain the gospel if anybody asked, and then you had to wear it all the time, or you got in trouble. And you also had to go to the meetings for this and church. So you had to do all these things in the week. And if you missed anything, or if you didn't remember your scripture, or if you didn't do all these things, like you were, talked to or demoted or punished, like. And so there was like once when they had us go out in the morning and like run around and walk out and step and walk out and be like apologize to God for failing him, and but we were given grace so we could go about our day. um that's the kind of extremity I'm talking about, like. So mind you, all that's going on, and I'm like, there's something wrong with me. I need to go get put. And I went through another type of breakup, like, and I was out away on my first time alone, and this was my source of community, and all those things I had unpacked. So, anyways, I went and I got myself on the antidepressants, and yeah. So Holly had done that in that situation, and then she found out later, obviously unpacking all that she was going through and what it was like in that lifestyle and the manipulation and control and narcissism, and you know and all this time she had autism, and so I can relate to all that. um yeah, all this time. But that's why I feel like literally when you unpack these things, people spend their whole life trying to outrun things and trying to shove it down and trying to ignore it or forget. And because a lot of us don't, we just don't understand, or we don't have resources, or we're sad. Like, the sadness can be debilitating, like, or we're scared, or we don't want to know. So I don't like the labels, but I feel like for a sense of understanding and like clarity, that knowledge is helpful. it helps you have a perspective that gives you more care for yourself and move forward. So yes, what's